The hell's going on?
Come on, get cracking! Do you want to be known as a failure?
Trying to find a good casual racing game on PC is as difficult as deciding which bottom YouTube poop is your favourite. At least the work of Bristles, Count Smegula, Joey Snowy and Steven's YouTube poops provide fuel for your funny bone at every pit stop, whereas looking on Steam only makes you want to choke on exhaust fumes while locked in your car. True, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed is one of the better games, apparently, but my criticisms remain the same as when I made my review. But Tabletop Racing World Tour is exactly what I want, where Richard and all Transformed was a boring racing game hidden underneath mouth-watering visuals. TTR is a great racer that's marred by its bland animations and repetitive locations. The appeal is supposed to come from driving in cleverly named vehicles and a variety of tables, similar to another game by Playrise Digital, Toybox Turbo, which is similar to Micro Machines on PlayStation 1. Why can't we just port the PS1 kart races onto PC? I mean, when you let shit like Wild Animal Racing on the store, you might as well add Coda Boogie Grand Prix to the pile! Maps include a table inside a garage, a table outside a gas station, or a petrol station as we call it here in the real world, a table with a sushi restaurant, a table in a child's room bloated with 80s reference, and a table on a cruise. Just when you thought your imagination wasn't running wildly enough with all the possible wacky hijinks that could go on, I'm afraid to burst your bubble car and say the novelty and visual appeal are horrendously short-lived, becoming merely tolerable after the first two championships. In order to unlock a new championship, one has to unlock the tournament at the end and win, but to do that you need to get at least 1 of 3 stars in the races before that, and they're all gated off until you've earned the adequate rating in previous tracks. Modes include your standard race, combat racing, time trials, hot laps, pursuit and drifting, the latter of which the game really isn't suited for, even with the drift wheels. Unlike Knuckles and Knuckles All Knuckles Transformed and Knuckles, everything works. Except the drift mode. TTR's combat system is pretty damn decent, involving projectile weapons that can slow and freeze opponents, and hazardous floor objects that, well, just slow people down. It's this that makes a great edifying experience into a more bothersome charade. Slowing is just that. Whether you're hit by a rocket or ram into a mine, you don't spin wildly out of control or bounce around like me after 9 cans of Undertaker's shit your pants hyper juice and a tumble down the stairs. No, you just slide along merrily with smoke pouring out your arse, unless you're in an ice cube, which I admit feels nice to drift along in. I get that World Tour tries to give players a chance to catch up and that sudden halts are unenviably frustrating, but I'd rather have a sudden surge of adrenaline and demand to push into first place rather than the slog that the game becomes when you're hit with a weapon. The game tries to offer more of an edge with weapon wheels that offer buffs and debuffs to your vehicle, all of which make you wish you had the ones that your rival racers do. You can slice up someone else's tyres with Boadiceas, bounce around a little bit, or just get bonus coins. Sadly, they don't solve the game's lack of personality and wackiness that it so desperately wants to boast, existing only to pad out an already toothless title. When you first rev up Tabletop Racing, you'll not fail to notice how stiff the controls are on all the cars, and had it not been for the easily accessible upgrades, my sour first impressions would have continued farther than a single hour. When your top speed, acceleration, handling and even your armor rating has been improved, everything feels better. You'll feel like you're in control. This is the first and only immediate problem I noticed, that in order to begin to enjoy the game, one must upgrade their vehicle stats, done so by earning coins from championships and special events. The better you do, the more booty you can get, though combat races and elimination races will earn you more when you hit other drivers with your weapons, and for full booty grabbing, get the bling wheels for that added coin gain. I must warn you though that there's only one good car per class, those classes being called Classics, Street Racers and Supercars, and you can identify it by its price and drifting ability. The only reasons why the other cars exist are for people on a budget, which doesn't work out well in the long run, and to be impressed by the skins. The skins which you'll only really likely see from the back. To be fair, they will see some use in special events. Some being the operative word. Like championships, these single races have star ratings, coins and XP, not to mention you don't have to do the previous ones to get the next, which immediately puts them above championships. The downside is the event chooses which vehicle and tyres you'll use, and it's very rarely going to work out in your favour. Special events only serve as a cheap attempt at replay value, but I must admit some of them are good and the restrictions can make for a tough race. On the other side of the checkered flag, they may also bore and frustrate players stuck in the main campaign, because they consist of similar challenges. For example, drift mode is still drift mode. It still sucks, regardless of the car, its wheels or the map I'm on. That could be said for all the maps though, as they are just set dressing for the 4 slightly different routes. However, from a design point of view, they have their ups and downs. Quite literally, with some attempts at verticality, ramps that make you lose all control and turns that require a good brake, which the game lacks. Because of this, you're only allowed to drive at 2 speeds, like it's Judgment Day or like a bag of mouldy penises. This isn't great in a race or combat race, but for time trials and hot laps it feels like a fair challenge and can often be played to your advantage. This really depends on which route you're doing though. I stand by my earlier comments that the maps are mere scenery. Repetitive, but bloody nice scenery nonetheless. Whichever location you're in though, the physics objects based on the level are plain obstructive. Not only do they have the least noticeable drop in speed when you collide with them, but they obscure powers because the devs are nonsensical poo-poo bombs. Not to mention everything seems to be filled with helium, or the cars I'm driving around in imbued with the might of Zeus. World Tour tries to incorporate unique level hazards and shortcuts in the environment, but they have no significance, requiring more work to activate than they're worth, as in, you need your power-ups to get them to work. But by the time you've used the required amount, it's the end of the race, and your weapons are more effective against other players anyway. If you want to see shortcuts done well, I recommend you check out my mad skills on my Crash Team Racing review or watch someone play Muppets Race Mania. But don't play it yourself, because it's rubbish! The artists of the game are incredibly talented, and it shows with all the fine details with items and names that reoccur without the need to constantly reuse assets. It's clear where shortcuts, turns and ramps are, making it easier for players new to racing games to get to grips with how the mechanics work. Sadly, it's all just very static. In spite of the colourful toys and 90s memorabilia in the children's room, it's just a dark and dingy cave. The sushi bar is a grey, robotic series of roads, choked of any signs that this will be a fun, wacky game. The garage and gas station are just dusty and lifeless. My favourite level was the cruise, but outside of its lighting, I couldn't tell you why it was so appealing. The cars on the other hand look really nice, and there wasn't a single skin I didn't want to buy and use, but by the time I could afford them all, I'd gotten the final trophy and all the special events I could tolerate. Reducing the price on the eye candy would really make me want to stick around for the game's multiplayer scene. World Tour soundtrack is something of a mixed bag. I like a lot of the songs because they were the kind that featured in other action sports games like SSX, Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure, and all that good stuff. It's the gateway drug of music that leads to you waving your arms around like a hooligan, taking LSD in a converted warehouse, and being blinded by lasers.
Let's scratch the paintwork and slam the doors of this review by giving you my final thoughts.
I've criticised Tabletop Racing World Tour quite heavily, and it wasn't my intention to make the negatives so glaring. Make no mistake, this is a great racing game, and I totally recommend it to anyone who wants one for PC, considering how rare they are. TTR offers tight controls, even if the braking's virtually non-existent, and its combat would be miles better had it just been better animated. Add some animation to the tracks, better lighting effects on something, anything to the background to make it seem less lifeless. What I'm trying to say is that the game is fantastic, but does little to show it, and I can only hope that my gameplay footage does it justice. This doesn't excuse the issues I've found to be comparable to Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transform though, as in its style is more visible than its substance. And finally, a word on the multiplayer. I loved it. I played only a couple of matches because that's all there was, and it's getting harder to find players who are still active. I can only hope there's more activity when I get the supercharged DLC, and after the joy I had with this, £1.99 isn't so bad for another fistful of fun.
Until the next time, I'm Johnbonne, your #1 source for number 2 games. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to ask Undertaker what the hell happened that caused me to wear this. Ta-ta for now.